Because if you don't create the space to feel it, to process it, to be in it, it stays in the tissues and the cells of your body. Hi everyone, welcome to the Lead from Love podcast. I am Yalini, I am your host and love coach. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about why you don't always have to put a positive spin on things and why being negative can actually be a good thing. Now, I know that might sound counterintuitive, and the reason I'm speaking up about this is because with all the hype on gratitude and positivity these days, it's like we've gone from one extreme to another. Now, I'm not saying that gratitude and positivity are bad, but the constant pressure to live from this space, it can rob you of the experience in this present moment. And on top of that, it could actually be making you miserable. I'm going to explain how. So in this episode, I'm going to explore the trap in striving to live from this constant, happy, grateful, positive state and how it can make things worse. I'm going to shed light on the impossible standards that it sets for your life. And then I'm going to offer an alternative approach that can create not only balance in your life, but help you let go of the unnecessary guilt so you can actually claim your freedom. Now, to start off with, let's just clear some things up because culturally, at least in Western countries, we tend to label emotions as either good or bad. So emotions like happiness, joy, and gratitude, they feel good inside. So naturally, we tend to label them as good. They light us up. We want more of it. But emotions like anger, sadness, and fear, they don't feel so good. So we tend to label them as bad. Now, I talked more about this in episode 2 on emotional freedom. And what I want to reiterate is that when we label emotions as either good or bad, we tend to place more value on good emotions. They're the ones that we want to strive towards and have more of in our lives. And as a consequence, we tend to look down on negative emotions because we don't want that to play a huge role in our lives. We almost want to distance ourselves from it to the point that sometimes we might even suppress or avoid those bad emotions like anger or sadness or fear. And worse than distancing or suppressing them, sometimes we end up judging ourselves for experiencing it. You know, I don't want to be angry. Why am I still sad? Why is this still bothering me? And it brings us down. But the truth is, there's no such thing as a good or bad emotion. They're all a part of life. They're all a part of your humanness. And we need them. They're important because when you lose someone, of course you're going to experience grief. You know, it might not feel good in the moment, but if you didn't feel grief, if you didn't feel sadness, you would worry if you even cared. And it's important to feel pain after heartbreak because even though it hurts, it's what builds resilience. It's what makes you stronger. And so these emotions, they're not bad. What they do is they connect you to the full breadth of your humanness. So you need all of these emotions, good or bad, not just to survive, not just to feel human, but to actually thrive in this life. So prioritizing the good emotions diminishes the importance of the bad. And what happens is it almost becomes like you are chasing happiness. And that's like chasing a drug. You're just looking for your next hit. Because instead of living and being fully in this present moment, you want to escape the bad emotion. You want to find a way to switch it in your mind to go back to feeling good. And anytime you are not in the present moment, it's not real. You're not living in the reality of what you are actually experiencing. What happens is you end up creating a story in a different version in your mind and you are living in that. And that's what happens when you end up wanting to avoid the bad emotion, you end up going back into your head. And of course, some people are okay and comfortable in these so-called bad emotions, and they allow themselves to actually experience it. And that's amazing if that's you. But let me ask you a question. Even if you let yourself feel into the bad emotion, how long do you let yourself stay there? Do you allow yourself to sit in it until it dissolves and fades away? Or is there some level of pressure where you reach a certain threshold and that's it? You've got to get out. I'm done. I'm tired of feeling angry. I'm tired of feeling sad. And you pull yourself out of it. Because I know that I've been there. Even when I try to let myself feel into the depths of my emotions, sometimes I'm over feeling angry. I'm over feeling sad and crying all the time. I'm over the pain. But sometimes that threshold and that need to pull ourselves out, it's a consequence of conditioning by a society that values the good emotions over bad. Because you know what? It's okay for us to feel happy for days or for weeks. That's not a problem. But feel sad for that long? Feel sad for days or for weeks? And that's normally a problem. There's this almost unwritten statute of limitation that at a certain point, you just need to move on. You just need to get over it and get on with it. And what I'll say is that it's true to a certain degree. We do need to be able to move on. We have responsibilities. We have a life to live. But there's a balance, because you also can't pretend that the pain isn't there, because that's how we make things worse. Because instead of processing and healing and releasing, we end up suppressing it to try and move on. We end up pushing it aside because we have things to get on with. We are over feeling low. But then it gets stuck. It hasn't been released. And that's how it can snowball over time. And that's why with clients, when we do the emotional release, they're not releasing emotions from a week or months ago. Normally it goes back decades. I've had clients regress all the way back into the womb. And it doesn't clear when they're born because we haven't been taught how to process our emotions, how to fully release it and be in it until it's gone. Now, that doesn't mean you sit in it 24/7 and that you have to be in a constant state of anger or sadness, because that's going to be too much. And here's the thing, your body doesn't even want to do it. It won't stay there because it's designed to be in flow. And so sitting in a prolonged state of anger or sadness or fear, it's too overwhelming for your nervous system. So what happens is your body will allow you to process emotions in waves. So you feel the wave of sadness, you feel the wave of anger, and then something needs to happen to pull you out. You might need to look at something that's funny or lift yourself up from that mood momentarily so that you can get on with life. You can be in a better moment until the next wave comes along. So your body will do this naturally. It will naturally support you to flow through it in a way that you can actually handle. So then when we put pressure on ourselves from needing to move through it faster, needing to be somewhere else, needing to be more positive, needing to be more optimistic or find the silver lining, that just creates more pressure on ourselves. And half the time it's not even about the emotion. It's not that being sad is bad. It's because of our thoughts about the emotion, our judgment of ourselves for being in it and where we should be. That's what creates that added level of misery. When if we just allowed it to be, we'd probably be over it already without added pressure, without having to find a positive spin. So let me give you an example of how that played out in my life recently and what I observed with what was going on. So for those of you that follow me on socials, you may know that a friend of mine passed away recently. And it was completely unexpected. She was only 40 years old. And then she went to sleep one night and she didn't wake up in the morning. So it was a complete shock. And as I shared what happened with friends, obviously, they were sympathetic and they checked to make sure I was okay. But what was really interesting to observe is that almost immediately there's this need to jump to a positive spin, to have a positive outlook. And so there would be feedback around, wow, it really goes to show how short life is and how we can't take things for granted. And, we never know when our time is up. All of which are true. But what's interesting is the need to jump to that straight away, because there's a level of discomfort in just sitting in the acceptance of what is without having to put a positive spin on it, to just look at it for what it is and go, wow, that sucks, and leave it there. Because when we sit in the allowing, we will naturally find our way to that silver lining without pressure, without any pushing. Because, for me personally, I am a naturally optimistic person. I tend to look at the brighter side or the bigger picture. That's how I move through life, especially when I go through tough things. But I've also done enough healing to be in a space where I now feel safe and comfortable in the full breadth of my emotions. I don't need to run away from my anger. I don't need to run away from my sadness. I'm able to let myself feel it and be in it when it comes up. And if you've listened to my journey in episode 1 or even episode 2 where I talk about emotions, you'll know that didn't come easily for me. I used to live in my head because I was so unbelievably scared of my emotions. I felt like my anger and my sadness would just overwhelm me because I didn't know how to process everything from growing up. And so now with what happened, I was okay to be in my sadness. I just wanted to sit in it. And what I teach and what I help my clients with beyond just the emotional healing is how to be real, how to be comfortable and at peace in the fullness of who they are. Not just the good emotions, but the uncomfortable ones too. Because part of life is living and experiencing all of it so that you can grow and transform through it all, because that is what real power is. It's not in avoiding, it's in feeling and being safe to feel. Because all emotions are a part of life. And sometimes things are just hard or unfair. Sometimes things they're shit. And it's okay to say it. It's okay to say that things suck. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to acknowledge that you are where you are. It's okay to just feel angry or to feel sad without needing to pull yourself out. You are allowed to be exactly where you are without having to add layers of guilt or pressure on yourself. So if you ever feel like it's not okay, this is support to validate that you're allowed to be where you are. It doesn't mean that you failed in some way as a human because you haven't found that brighter side, that you are not living in positivity or gratitude. What it means is that you are human because you are experiencing a natural part of life, and it is important to give yourself permission to be in it. And when I say be in it, I mean be in your body, to feel it, not in your mind, because that is when you are creating a story where you are analyzing and you are thinking your way through it. That's not where the processing happens. It's in your body. It's allowing yourself to be present in that emotion, to feel it fully without resistance, because that is when it drops away. Because here's the point of difference. Acknowledging that you are where you are doesn't make you a pessimist, because it doesn't mean that you set up camp and throw your hands up in the air and say, what's the point? It's not about giving up, because everything doesn't need to have a positive spin, at least not straight away. What you're doing is allowing things to simply run their course, because eventually you know that you'll move on. You just don't have to force it. You can let it happen naturally. And here's the crazy thing. By not getting caught in the trap of needing to be positive, of needing to be in gratitude or find that silver lining, it means that you are not putting added pressure on yourself to be out of it already. You can actually move through it a lot faster. Because once that bad emotion is processed, then you're actually ready to move on. There is nothing else holding you back. That is when you are more powerful. And here's why else this is important. Because being real, it allows you to be true to yourself. Because that pressure to be positive or to be further ahead than you are, that is inauthentic. It's all about keeping up appearances. But wearing that mask, keeping up appearances, that is exhausting. And it can make you feel really alone. Because then you're not being seen or accepted for who you are. So giving yourself permission to just own where you are, to own that moment, to own that experience, even if that just means saying, sometimes, you know what, life just sucks. And as long as you don't set up camp there, as long as you're not replaying that moment over and over again, because again, that puts you in your head. If you allow yourself to actually be in your body and process it, however long that takes you, that can be the greatest act of self-love and self-compassion. Because you're not judging yourself for where you are. You are allowing yourself to just be. And that is how you allow yourself to move on. Because without resistance, it can drop away. And the reason it is so important to just take that pressure off of ourselves and be real is because when we're constantly looking for ways to live in gratitude, it ends up setting an impossible standard for our lives. Because here's the truth. When we're constantly talking about things like you need to seize the moment, you need to live each day like it's your last, you need to take advantage of everything that comes up, that's not realistic. Look, yes, there are some benefits to thinking that way because it can be the inspiration to not put things off, to actually find the courage to get over your fears and to live your dreams so that you don't get to the end with regrets. That is beneficial. But actually seizing every moment or living every day like it is your last, that's an impossible standard. And it's not realistic because for me, if I was living my last day, especially with the adventurous spirit that I have, I'd be wanting to jump out of a plane and go skydiving. I'd want to go hang gliding. I'd want to go whitewater rafting. I'd want to go go-karting. I'd want to be traveling and enjoying beautiful meals. But I can't live every day like that. I would burn out. Because here's the thing. You still need the energy to get through the next day. So to constantly push yourself for this impossible standard, it puts a lot of pressure on you, to the point that if one day you didn't do enough, then you feel guilty. You blame yourself that you wasted the day, that it wasn't good enough. Instead of just giving yourself permission to go, you know what, I was exhausted today. And so the best thing I could have done for myself is actually just rest. Instead of looking at it like a waste. Because why does self-love and compassion and care have to be considered a waste? Because otherwise, what are we really striving for? Let's just play that tape forward. To always be happy, to never be sad, to never be exhausted. We're human, we're not robots. And imagine if you could actually see someone that took everything in their stride, that was never down, that always had something good to say, that never seemed to be ruffled by anything that went on through life. On the surface, it might sound great, but in reality, it would start to feel inauthentic. But there's also nothing to connect to. There's no depth or substance in that. Because deep down, you know that it's impossible. It's impossible to only live from joy and happiness and positivity. So instead of judging ourselves for feeling low, why don't we just embrace it as a natural part of life? Because the truth is, for someone to be happy all of the time, it would feel artificial. And that's not actually what we want. So a better approach that can bring more balance into your life is to just be authentic. To allow yourself to be in the moment, whatever that looks like. Because when we allow ourselves to simply be, that hope, that gratitude, that positivity, it naturally flows back, because your body will process things in waves. It won't want to sit in the depths of despair. It will want you to then flow and move forward again. And it happens naturally when we take that pressure off. Because look, as great as it is to be happy and fun and optimistic, only living from that space creates superficial relationships. Because the truth is, our deep and meaningful connections, they're forged through tough times. We bond through challenges. Think about the people in your life. Think about the people that you could call to go out and just have a nice, fun night out on the town. Are they the same people as the ones that you would call if you were in a crisis? When something was really going down in your life? And in some circumstances, they may be the same. But I'm going to bet that there are also people in your life that you would only count on for the fun, superficial nights out. Because the ones that you call in a crisis are the ones that you have gone through tough times with. They're the ones that you have shared real moments of pain and despair with, that have seen you cry and be in all of your mess. And that is what creates deep and meaningful connections. Because they open us to our hearts. We create a space of vulnerability where it stops being a facade, where we stop having to be strong, where we're so exhausted that we don't have the energy to pretend anymore. That is when we are raw and real. And the power in that is that it gives the other person permission to embrace the fullness of who they are too. We empower one another with truth and real connection. And the beauty in that is if you give yourself permission to open up and to be vulnerable and to connect, then not only will your body do its natural thing to pull you out, but because you feel seen, because you feel heard, because you feel held or acknowledged or supported, that will create more hope for you. That will create more positivity for you naturally, because then you feel loved, you feel supported. And so you will naturally move forward without there being anything more that you need to do. Because all of that pressure is just pressure to be inauthentic. And you don't have to be there yet. You can just be you. You'll flow back to yourself when you're ready. Because, as great as that hope and that optimism and that joy is, it's not the be all and end all. It's one part of life, and it doesn't make it any better than the sadness and the grief. And it is an important part of the journey. You need to feel those bad or uncomfortable emotions sometimes, not just to feel like you're a human being, but to actually grow as a person. Because the pressure to be positive, the pressure to be grateful, the pressure to find that silver lining in every experience, it makes you feel bad. It makes you feel guilty. It's unnecessary pressure that also takes you out of this present moment. And it keeps you stuck in the pain, because instead of being in your body and processing and releasing, you're telling yourself off in your mind. You're making yourself feel worse in the moment. And that's when you stop processing. That's when it becomes trapped in the cells of the body and snowballs over time. And so, although gratitude and positivity, it has a place when you're ready. Not when you're forcing yourself to. And living like everything is great, taking life constantly in your stride, it isn't realistic. It's an impossible standard to live by, because no one can be happy and optimistic and grateful all of the time. It would feel fake. It's inauthentic. And you wouldn't trust someone like that. So the greatest act of love and self-compassion is just to be real. Real with where you're at. Acknowledging, sometimes you're going to have good days and sometimes you're going to have bad days. And it's all okay. It is all a part of life. Because that allowing is what creates balance. Because from there, things can flow. You can flow through whatever is happening. You can flow through the waves. You can flow through connection and vulnerability and depth. Because that's what creates the invitation to let people show up and support you. So that you don't have to do this life on your own. Because when you have that community around you, at a certain point you'll start to feel better. Not because you have to, not because someone told you to, but simply because you feel better. Because having love gives you hope. Having support pulls you out of your loneliness. Because now there's proof that things can get better, that there's still life to live. No one is here to do this life on their own. And your bad emotions, despite however uncomfortable they may be in the moment, they are real. And they can be the connection point that builds community around you. So it can be so important. So no, you don't always have to put a positive spin on things. And being negative or in these bad emotions can sometimes be a good thing. because that's how we connect. That's how we can feel loved, not to stay in it, but to actually naturally, without pressure, pull us out. So give yourself permission to be real, to be in whatever you are experiencing. Throw away the labels, throw away the judgment and the pressure and the guilt. Just let them drop away. Your body knows what it is doing. It is designed to heal and love you and support you. And if you just let it do its thing and pull yourself out naturally, that can be the greatest act of self-compassion. That can be the building block for community and for love and connection. And that is not only authentic, but that is leading from love.